My name is Brian Schulman. I am the producer of BTS Presents.
Maybe she's lucky, or maybe it's divine. Have you heard the story about Trucker Teri's fine?
Teri, I want to ask you for permission to use this interview for producing the BTS Present show and for publicizing and promoting the show, the sale of the show, and the sale of your very valuable painting. May we have your permission to do this?
You sure do.
Now, Teri, I'm going to ask you some questions about this wonderful painting. Can you tell us the dimensions of the painting, please?
68 inches by 48.
Very large painting. Teri, is the thread count of the canvas consistent with other canvases?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Was this painting that you have ever restored or cleaned?
No.
Is the paint consistent with previous or subsequent paints?
Yes, it is.
Are the brush strokes consistent with other canvases?
There are no brush strokes.
There are no brush strokes.
No. He drip painted. He poured painting. He didn't use a brush.
That's right. He didn't use a brush. He used sticks. He used trowels. He used a number of things. He poured the paint on his canvases, correct?
Right. He used turkey filters and, like you said, tubes of paint that he would squirt the dot and get those kind of patterns.
My home is in Springs, East Hampton, Long Island. I don't work from drawings or color sketches. Sometimes I use a brush, but often prefer using a stick. Sometimes I pour the paint straight out of the can. I like to use a dripping, fluid paint. I also use sand, broken glass, string. A method of painting is the natural growth out of a need. I want to express my feelings rather than illustrate them. Technique is just a means of arriving at a statement. When I am painting, I have a general notion as to what I am about. I can control the flow of the paint. There is no accident, just as there is no beginning and no end. Sometimes I lose a painting. But I have no fear of changes, of destroying the image. Because a painting has a life of its own, I try to let it live.
So stylistically, is the painting you have, is that consistent with his other works?
We find that it is, yes.
Okay. Does the design match? Is it similar to others?
Yes, it matches up with quite a few of them. One of them is number 5 that it matches with. It has the same type of swing of the paint and so on and so forth that many of the others do. But the Pollock Krasner studio there, where Helen Harrison takes care of his stuff.
Tell me about the International Foundation for Art Research, the IFAR.
Somebody sent him a painting that the painting was in the catalog raisonné, and he just wanted to see how good they were. They rejected it.
Okay. How about Peter Paul Bureau?
Oh, he's a great guy, forensic scientist. Loves his Joanna, who's his wife, and he loves doing his work.
On his own, he traveled to the small Long Island town of East Hampton.
The best way, really the only viable way to interpret evidence is through its relationship to its environment. This is plain, old-fashioned forensic approach. Pollock's studio is basically a 20-foot square barn. It is like an undisturbed gravesite. The whole floor is covered with paint. The overshot flings of his creative process where he painted his drip paintings. What can I find in the paint? I was examining the floor, taking paint samples with a scalpel. I was looking for fingerprints on the floor as well. About a dozen paint cans that Pollock used for painting are exhibited in a showcase.
That's great. And how old are you, Teri?
I'm 80. I was turned 80 October 3rd this last year.
So you're 80 years old.
Right, born in 1932.
1932. I think Jackson Pollock was born in 1912.
Right, yep.
And he passed away in 1956.
Right.
Car accident.
Yep.
Yep.
He was killed in a car accident, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so I understand there's a fingerprint on this painting.
Right.
Is that on the front of the painting? Is it on the back of the painting?
Right, on the canvas on the back.
It's on the back of the canvas.
Right, on the verso, as they would say.
Okay, and it's my understanding that there are fingerprints on paint cans that
Right.
Jackson Pollock used. How did you have that fingerprint checked out?
San Bernardino Sheriff's Department fingerprint deputy come out and look at it.
So you called the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department.
Said that they were definitely prints. My point being is that Paul was accused of having applied the fingerprints. The Sheriff's Department had already looked at him long before he ever had his hands on the paintings.
We had the painting laid out on a table with some lights.
Look, I believe it's a Pollock. How am I going to prove it? I photographed the painting in many details. I started taking paint samples. Then I turned the canvas around, and right there on the back of the canvas is what appears to be a fairly clear fingerprint.
Now that he had a usable print to work from, Bureau needed a print to compare it with. Finally, on a privately owned Pollock painting in Berlin, he found an apparent match to the fingerprint on the back of Teri's canvas. Bureau, who couldn't justify the discrepancy in size, was at a temporary dead end.
About a dozen paint cans that Pollock used for painting are exhibited in a showcase. I have found some of those with the same paintbrush in it on photographs dating back to 1950, when Pollock actually physically worked there. I examined all of them. I was looking at a fingerprint on a blue paint can. By this time, I had memorized Teri's painting's fingerprint. I felt this could be it. This could be the end of the search.
Was Bureau right? It would be several months and a battery of tests before he'd know for sure.
The printing on the label of the paint can comes through it. I wanted to remove the bright and the dark bands so that the fingerprint-rich characteristics can be seen more easily. Fortunately, through digital image processing, the background could be extracted. I also adjusted contrast, brightness, and gamma so as to display the rich characteristics with the greatest clarity. Through this kind of methodology, I was able to see that there was a perfect match between the fingerprint on the back of Teri's canvas and the blue paint can from the Pollock Krasner house.
To verify his results, Bureau enlisted the services of Sergeant Andre Turcotte, a fingerprint expert who for 15 years was in charge of the Montreal Crime Lab of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Turcotte demonstrated that the branches of the ridgelines, called bifurcations, are the same on both prints.
An examination like this, it's easy to say that it's a real match.
You're sure?
I'm sure.
On the left is the fingerprint from the back of Teri's painting. On the right is the print from the can of paint in Jackson Pollock's studio. The bifurcations described by Andre Turcotte are outlined in yellow. And when the two prints are brought together, it is apparent they are one and the same. More scientific evidence was accumulating that Teri's painting did come from Pollock's studio.
I did collect a match that was embedded in paint from the Pollock studio floor. When you look at the underside of this match under the microscope, what you find is a large particle of gold paint. We know that Pollock used to spray paint. And when you do that, these very tiny microscopic airborne particles can travel. And it will deposit on the walls, on the floors, ceiling, whatever objects are inside that studio. So I started to look at samples from Teri's painting very closely under the microscope. This is about a 400 times magnification on Teri's painting. On the surface, you can see many, many gold particles. It's just covered with gold spray paint.
When British scientist Nicholas Easthoff, a colleague of Biro's, compared the paint on Teri's canvas with the paint on Pollock's floor, he found the same chemical component in both.
The conclusion has to be that there is acrylic both in Teri's painting but also in drips on Pollock's studio floor that can be tied to his drip paintings.
Have you ever been to the Pollock-Krasner house?
Yes, to do 60 Minutes. The gal that was taking care of it was Helen Harrison. Anderson Cooper, he interviewed me for that, and that was fun.
You were on the David Letterman show also. Is it true that painting number 5 looks somewhat like your painting?
Well, if you put them right next to each other, you can't hardly tell them apart. They just blended right in together, and you couldn't hardly, like I said, you couldn't hardly tell them apart, but the colors were different.
The value of this number 5, do you know what number 5 sold for, Pollock's number 5?
Well, they say it sold for 140 million, but nobody can really trace it down. Martinez says that he doesn't have it, so nobody knows where it is, really.
How interesting. Are you familiar with the painting Red, Black, and Silver?
Oh, I know about it, but I'm not familiar with it at all, other than what I've read. I've had no contacts with Kligman or anything, and it's a shame, you know, that she passed away before she could get hers taken care of.
So Jackson Pollock's mistress, Ruth Kligman, said she watched him paint this picture just before his fatal 1956 car crash. Kligman had X-radiograph and infrared scan testing conducted on the painting. The official conclusion of Joseph Battaglia, the conservator who conducted the tests: nothing is inconsistent with this painting having been created in the 1950s. Dor Ashton, a respected art critic, historian, and writer, I have no reason to doubt the authenticity of this painting.
Kligman submitted Red, Black, and Silver to the Pollock-Krasner Authentication Board for evaluation.
The supplement went to print that year without mention of Red, Black, and Silver. Leo Castelli, widely regarded as one of America's most influential art dealers, who'd worked closely with Pollock, wrote, "To the best of my knowledge and belief, this painting, entitled Red, Black, and Silver, is by Jackson Pollock. The Authentication Board, disbanded in early 1996, can no longer respond to the request for authentication." There were 2 movies about Pollock.
The one that Ed Harris did, and then the one that Harry Moses did. The movie that Harry Moses made is shown in so many universities and colleges, you can't believe it. The one that Ed Harris did, he did a good job on it. A good part of it is factual.
Who's Nick Carone?
He was in the movie, and I met him when we went to the premiere. He said, "Hey, girl," he said, "don't give up." And I said, "I won't." The boys were smart to tell him not to commit himself.
The American artist Nicholas Carone was one of Jackson Pollock's closest friends. Historians referred to Carone as a primary source and foremost authority on the subject of Jackson Pollock.
88-year-old artist Nick Carone, a friend of Pollock's, remembers the day 50 years ago when Jackson finally sold his first big work.
He comes on beaming and like that, you know, and he said, "Well, tell us, did you sell the painting?" He said, "Yeah, I sold it."
Sadly, Carone passed away in July 2010, but in a 2011 interview, Carone's twin sons, Claude and Christian, confirmed that their father was advised to keep his true personal opinion to himself in order to play it safe and avoid unwanted attention. Christian Carone said it was his doing. Both sons confirmed that the father, Nicholas Carone, told them that Teri Horton's painting was a real Jackson Pollock.
Right.
Claude Carone, he told me he thought it was real. Christian Carone, he thought it was real. I told him, I think it's real.
He also said the film's comparison to Pollock's No. 5, 1948, owned by David Geffen, particularly worried him. In Teri's film, when they spliced the painting from Geffen and they showed her with hers, it looked exactly the same, in a way that it could have been a spliced painting. I think that painting was cut from some other painting.
But Horton's story may not end here. In a book by Deborah Solomon, Jackson Pollock, a biography, the author interviews Pollock's widow, Lee Krasner, who tells the story of Pollock's No. 5. That story is told a number of times by different sources, among them Pollock's dealer, Peggy Guggenheim. Apparently No. 5 was sold and delivered to Alfonso Osorio, damaged, who then wished to have it repaired. Pollock repaired the painting and returned it. Solomon's interview with Lee Krasner tells a very different story, but describes the painting as a red painting and as a canvas. But the No. 5 we know today, previously owned by S.I. Newhouse and later by David Geffen, is described everywhere as a painting on fiberboard, and when examining it, it cannot be described as red. Krasner stated it was returned because of a scab of paint sliding across it, distorting the canvas. According to Krasner, Pollock created an entirely new painting. She screamed, Osorio's painting no longer existed, and when Carone saw the montage of the Geffen No. 5 and the Horton canvas in the documentary, it was like one painting. It looked exactly the same. Is Carone suggesting that the Horton painting is the canvas No. 5 and Pollock just cut off the offending part? Edge to edge, including the stretched and folded parts, the painting is approximately 70 3/4 by 51 inches. The stretched work measures 66 by 47 5/8 inches. According to her book, Solomon was given unrestricted access by Lee Krasner to Pollock's papers, and Eugene Thaw, co-author of the Pollock Catalog Raisonné, gave Solomon permission to quote from these papers. No. 5 is a 4 by 8 foot painting on fiberboard and not a painting that can be described as red or on canvas.
On the left-hand side of the screen, we see a detail from Teri Horton's painting. On the right-hand side, we see a detail of roughly the same size from a Pollock painting entitled No. 5. When you put these pictures close together, what we end up is an image like this. And I tried putting several areas taken from different areas of both pictures, and I end up with the same result. Which is which?
Tell us about finding this painting in Dot's Spot thrift store in San Bernardino.
Well, I had been down to a feed store across the street from this thrift store that there was on the corner, and I was getting a bale of hay for my son's horse. And I decided to go over there and look for something to give to a friend of mine who was really down in the dumps. And I wandered in there, and I saw this painting at the way back in the back of the room, leaning up against the wall. And I went down and looked at it. I thought, oh, this would be great for her because she lived in a little bitty trailer, a little 25-foot trailer. I took it up to the clerk. She was sitting there reading the True Romance book. And I asked her what she'd take for it, and she didn't look up. She said she'd take $8 for it, and I said, I love my friend, but I don't love her that much, so she let me have it for $5. Of course, she didn't have any place to put it, so I put it in my storage shed.
So you put it in a storage shed.
Right.
And how long did you keep it?
Oh, I don't know. It had been there for numerous months, I guess, and then I decided to clean out my storage and have a yard sale, and that's when I put it in the yard sale.
You put it in a yard sale, and somebody walked by and told you it might be a Jackson Pollock?
No, I had a friend that was coming to the sale, and she was helping me, and she was dating an art professor at the Riverside University, and he looked at it, and that's when he told me that he thought, he was no expert, he said, on the Pollock, but he thought that's who had done the painting was Jackson Pollock.
Wow. Do you know who Jackson Pollock is now?
Oh, you bet I do.
I want to hear more about this art professor telling you that it was a Jackson Pollock. Did he give you an idea of what value this painting might have?
No, he just said it was very valuable. So I just stuck it back in the back of the shed, covered it up, and forgot about it.
You know, I just have to say that man must have been a really honest man not to take advantage of you.
Right, he was. Yeah, he was. He's no longer alive now, but yeah, he could have said, yeah, he would take it, but he didn't.
So here you are with a very valuable painting that you were ready to give to somebody who was such an honest person that he didn't take it.
Right. Yeah, I guess I would say that was divine intervention, maybe, or just I don't know what you call it, honest, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I call it real good. Teri, it's been wonderful talking with you this evening. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome, Kathy.
One more thing before you go, Teri. You want people to contact the BTS Present show, and
Right.
we'll have Brian contact you. Does that sound like a good idea?
That sounds fine, and then I have attorneys in New York that can take over.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Maybe she's lucky, or maybe it's divine. Have you heard the story about Trucker Terry's fine? Should have been easy to prove her pain and true. A world full of experts that she could see right through. No one could beat her. Yeah, she found another way. A knight in shining armor, riding a horse called DNA. Yeah, Da Vinci or Michelangelo. It's not a Pablo Picasso, a Rembrandt, or even Van Gogh. I know she's finally found it, been on a 10-year rush to find a home for the painting whose canvas never felt the brush. Thank you, Jackson Pollock.